Uh,
Hello, hello. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like really tiny. Look at that.
I'm gonna leave it unmuted. You did unmute that guy, so let's check your settings. Oh, you're muted here. That would do it.
That would help.
Shut up.
Ah, look, I showed up. It says
La
right
la
there.
la 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 la.
Now it's getting
now
you.
it's getting
Okay,
me.
we're good.
There you go.
La 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 la.
Keep showing up on the screen.
Is it? Okay.
Oh,
Your la, la, la.
la.
How are you? How art thou?
Here we are recording.
Great, thank you.
Do I have security?
Okay, welcome, everybody. Today is Tuesday, June 18th, 2024, and this is the Conwood Heights City Council work session. My name is Mike Wickers, and I'm the mayor of Conwood Heights. Before we get into our review of our business meeting agenda for tonight, this is going to be the last work session for our city manager, Tim Tingy. And Tim was telling me the other day, you've been in how many city council meetings?
Roughly 620.
How many of those did you like?
Do I have to comment?
619.
So, you know, most people are aware, and obviously if the public isn't, Tim has accepted a position up at the University of Utah teaching full-time. And as a city, we are going to miss Tim. He's provided great leadership, you know, support for staff and management. And so it's a melancholy for us, whether it is for him or not, this is it. But I did want to publicly say thank you, Tim, for all you've done for us. Okay.
Thank you.
So let's review our business meeting agenda quickly. So we'll start with the pledge. Councilmember Burrell, would you mind leading us in that this evening?
Delighted.
Okay. We will then have our monthly city council committee reports. I know everyone's excited to hear about our updates on what we've been doing. We'll have a citizen comment period. And then we have a public hearing scheduled tonight, and this is for our proposed budget amendment. And this is, you know, I'll turn some time over to Scott. We do this every year to basically forward unused funds that are budgeted for projects that haven't been able to use during the calendar year. Am I right, Scott? Is there anything else you're going to add to that?
This is the one, actually, the police funds, we went over it last time, it's about $25,000 that we have. The rebudget of the unused projects, that we won't do that till about September.
Okay,
But yeah, this we reviewed through last council meeting. It's basically the agreements where we're reimbursed for overtime or other things that directly benefit the police department. We just want to recognize the expense and revenue for those.
Okay.
It's 25,736 expense and revenue, so it's offsetting.
okay, great. So we'll have a public hearing on that item. I doubt we'll have a lot of feedback on it, but maybe we will, you never know. And then we will move on to our action items for tonight. And the first one that we have scheduled to vote on is actually specific to this budget amendment. So we'll adopt the amended budget, the last one for this fiscal year, before we start our new fiscal year on July 1st. And that will begin with our next legislative item, which is adopting our final budget for the 24-25 fiscal year. We've got that as a staff report, so I'll let you talk about that more in just a second, Scott. And then item 6.3, consideration of resolution 2024-40, adopting a privacy space compliance plan. So we've talked about this, but I'll let Tim, why don't you refresh us on what?
Yeah, this was part of new legislation that came out this past year by the state legislature. And it states that government entities have to have a privacy compliance plan. Shane Topham prepared that plan. We talked about it last week. It basically follows the points outlined in that legislation, and we're recommending approval of this plan.
Thank you. Item 6.4, consideration of resolution 2024-41, approving an agreement with LRB Public Finance Advisors for arbitrage analysis and compliance reporting. Scott.
So periodically on tax exempt bonds, you need to do an arbitrage compliance report. It basically compares your interest earned against your interest paid to see if you owe money, because you're not allowed, well, within certain parameters, you can earn some interest on those funds, but you have to meet certain requirements and so on and so forth in order to do that. So the compliance report basically tests all that, makes sure that we don't owe money to the federal government. These are older bonds that have both been looked at multiple times, but with us paying them off on July 1st, I think it's important that we do this, plus the bond indentures for both of these bonds indicated that we ought to do one at this time anyhow. So this kind of, it will be our final arbitrage reports that we'll need to do to show that we don't owe funds to the federal government from an arbitrage perspective on those two bonds. So.
Perfect. Questions, comments from council? Thank you, Scott. Well, and then after that's item 6.5, we'll consider resolution 2024-42, approving an amendment to a consulting agreement with Civil Science Inc. Matt.
Civil Science is our design engineers for the 1700 East Sidewalk project. If you'll recall, that goes from 7200 down to Fort Union on the west side. And we've completed that design. The project's been bid out, so we're amending the design contract to include the construction management portion of this.
Questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Matt. Item 6.6 is consideration of resolution 2024-43, consenting to reappointments to the Parks, Trails and Open Space Advisory Committee. Tim.
Yeah, so forwarded the information, including the background of these three individuals that have served really well on the Parks, Trails and Open Space Committee. It's Zachary Geiger, Jennifer Shaw, and Chelsea Voss, and I am recommending that they serve another 3-year term, each one of them, and so I'm recommending approval of this resolution based on that.
Questions or comments from the council? Okay, great. And then item 6.7, consideration of resolution 2024-44, appointing an interim city manager. Tim.
Yeah, so per the form of our government, the council manager form it designates having a city manager, an interim city manager, if the city manager is not able to perform her or his duties. And so this is just to follow what our form of government outlines, as well as something that we practiced at other times when we've had a city manager that has retired or gone to a different job. So the recommendation is to have Scott Jurgis, who is involved in the whole city and in various aspects with his work in finance and administrative services, to be the interim city manager until the council fills the position. And so that's the recommendation. That's what the resolution outlines tonight, recommending approval.
Great. Questions, comments?
Does he have to accept it or he has no choice?
Well,
He's smiling. It's okay. We're all right.
We appreciate him being willing. So, and then the last item for this evening is item 6.8, consideration of resolution 2024-45, approving a consulting agreement with Tim Tingy. I wanted to mention first off, I am the one who brought this to Tim's attention. It wasn't Tim, you know, especially knowing that we might have a period of time without his services before we hire somebody else. And even having Scott, I wanted to be able to make sure that we didn't feel that we were burdening him if we were reaching out to help us get through this short period. And so I felt like creating a consulting agreement would be fair to him, would let us reach out to him at least 27 times a day. Okay.
There's a minimum.
There might be a minimum, no, but anyway, at least we will be able to you not feel like we're placing a undue burden on you without at least some type of compensation. So any questions or comments from the council on this item? Okay. And then the last item is our consent calendar, which is approval of the minutes for both the May 21st and the June 4th meetings for both the work sessions and business meetings and the CDR business meeting. Okay. So we are, once a year, we get the opportunity to invite the general manager and CEO of Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling, Pam Roberts, to come and visit with us and give us some background on how things are going. And I know this year she has some recycling items that she'd like to talk about. So Pam, coming up, and we'll be happy to hear from you.
Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Paula. So yeah, Tim had asked me to come and provide a report for you all. It's been a little while since I've been here last. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that we have a new truck on the front page of my report. So we went without new trucks and Matt, you can probably relate to trying to get equipment. Yes.
She let me operate this one.
Yes,
They let me pick up a garbage can. They were smart. They didn't put anything in it. Cause I think I just chucked that thing into oblivion, but.
he actually did pretty good. I was being very humble. But yeah, for 2 years, we did not get any side loaded trucks and so our maintenance costs went up quite a bit, just over 16%. It's just been really difficult to manage, so we're happy to have these trucks. Also, our equipment operators morale has improved greatly because we don't have as many breakdowns and we have reliability on these trucks, so very happy about that. And
Hopefully, we were able to sell all the bad ones to Sandy. Yeah. No, I didn't say that out loud.
I didn't even think about that. How do I push on it?
She just parked in there and leave it.
But this one doesn't replace the one that burned, right? It doesn't. Is this additional? Did that one get fixed?
The replacement, the one that was in the former newsletter
Yeah.
is still unfortunately sitting and we're waiting for a buyer for that. And once they commit, then we want to tow it. If we can't get a commitment, we're gonna tow it to the vendor to basically replace the body. So we're just trying to figure out who's gonna come first. That's a replacement truck for 2014 truck. That's how long we've had to keep some trucks. So we wanted to kind of experiment to see how long we could keep a truck before we hit that tipping point of maintenance outweighs the cost for purchase. And now we know more than we wanted to know. So we'll be, we know that the 7-year mark is the max, and we have trucks that are 9 and 10 years old. So not by choice, I might say, but we're managing as best we can. All right, so moving into announcements, I wanted to let you know that our driver of the year, junior vigil, every year we enter a driver into this contest. It's nationwide, and we participate and compete in the government sector. And for 2024, Junior Vigil did win the competition. We've been doing a national competition since 2011, and he is our 8th winner, and we have had some runner-ups. So there's only been a couple of years that we just quite didn't get to the mark. So we're very proud of our team. He's one of our veterans. He's been with us since 2011. And he's mainly on recycling. So the picture just below Junior is our board chair, Anna Barbieri, honoring him at our board meeting with a resolution. And then I want to make sure that I introduce you and welcome you to with James Kelsey. He's our new sustainability coordinator. McKenna Tuabe had left us some months back, and James was promoted within, which was a great opportunity because now we can promote for his position, which was a quality assurance, which again helps morale. Anytime we can promote within, that's always a morale booster. So he wanted to be here today, but he had to attend a conference, but eventually he'll get to events like Butler Days. You'll see him there in a booth and so forth.
Can I make a quick comment?
Please.
I want to just praise Sione. When I called up one time about an issue, he responded quickly, and your team responded right away, just as he stated. He's something else.
Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He is.
Sione, he is over our recycling and green waste and then the scrap
Yeah.
program. Yeah, thank you for
May I
that.
interject something? Leone worked for us first,
Oh,
or second. He was part-time. We took him full-time.
Okay.
We trained him. Go ahead, Pam. The floor is all yours again.
Oh, thanks so much. All right, so getting into environmental stewardship, as you know, we pick up a lot of waste. It can be up to 145,000 tons of waste. Garbage is the majority of that. We have recycling, we have green waste, we have glass that we pick up as well. So this is, we measure for each city what the diversion rate is. How much are we diverting, like recycling in the green and like everything I mentioned. One of the things I want to highlight is, and thank the city, is helping us to find that location for another glass site, since we needed to move it from the Public Works yard. Thanks, Matt. And we were able to get a location at Whitmore Library, so that was put in place of quite a few months back. So we have the curbside option with 434 subscribers in Cottonwood Heights, and we also have the central location, 7 of which are throughout the district. And curbside green waste subscribers, we have 1,600, just over 1,600 here in Cottonwood Heights. And we do save money with the green waste versus it goes for composting versus the landfill. It's one of the commodities that we pay less. Recycling has varied the commodity markets, I think you're aware, but they are improved and they're trending down towards right around what we pay for garbage, which right now the max we pay is $39 a ton for garbage. Any questions on that before I?
Are you able to use all the compost that's produced? Does it get used?
Good
Unpurchased?
question. So we deliver it to the Salt Lake Valley landfill. Transjordan used to accept green waste, but they had a severe fire at the compost location just at the end of last year, or beginning of which there's been a few fires I'm trying to keep track of, but luckily nobody was hurt. It was after hours. They did have severe damage to their equipment, so they actually had to shut down that facility a little sooner. They were planning on closing it down this year, but they had to close it a little
So
sooner.
Transjordan is already closed
Composting, yes.
for composting.
For composting only. They still are open for garbage, and we take the southwest portion of the district to Transjordan, and they have the $39 per ton. They have the highest garbage fee. Yes, ma'am, I think you have a question about their new transfer station, I bet.
Well, I would love to hear everything you're willing to share, but I understand the Transjordan site is scheduled or anticipated to fill and be maxed out. When do you think that'll happen?
Last I heard, they were projecting 8 years.
Oh, 8 more years?
Yeah, that's what I've heard. It just depends. There's so much growth out there in the Southwest. I know they're monitoring it, and it has actually come down from previous years that they were anticipating up to 15. It dropped to 10, now it's to 8. I think you may have heard that they're opening a transfer station in Sandy City, right by the Sandy City Public Works. We've done an analysis to see how much garbage makes sense, and we look at price and proximity. And I apologize, I'm gonna get really nerdy here and go into my stuff, but price and proximity to where we take garbage and recycling, it's very important. Whoever gives us the lowest cost, depending on the proximity to the route, that's where we're gonna go for whatever commodity that is. It only looks like there's about 1,000 homes in White City that would make sense for us to go to that facility. Cottonwood Heights, it's a shot off the freeway and we get right to that transfer station. So that's probably where we will go. We have an agreement with Salt Lake Valley landfill that we would take a certain percentage of our waste to their facilities. They have the transfer station off 33 and 500 West. They also have the landfill out on California, 5600 West. So we take a portion of that to them. We have a commitment. We've already got in place that we can drop the percentage once Transjordan opens their transfer station. So that's the plan.
Just don't have the answer about the compost. So is it all used? If it's composted, is it all used?
Sorry,
cold?
yeah. I told you I got nerdy. I apologize. So I don't know exactly how much, but what I understand, I attend a monthly meeting about the landfill and the composting itself. I don't measure that, but they report out. And from what I understand, they are reselling quite a bit. It really depends on what they resell, and then anything that they aren't able to process to get to a nice product, they will use on roads out there in the landfill for cover. So it's reused. It may not be to the most optimal level of out in somebody's yard, but it is being reused.
You say they, who is they?
Salt Lake Valley landfill, Salt Lake Valley, solid waste, excuse me, it's under Salt Lake County.
Because Wasatch Front Waste Recycling is really
You're the collector.
the collector.
We are the collector.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for your question. I'll promise not to be too so,
No, it was a really good answer. I just like to understand what happens to what's
Yeah.
in the garbage. Where does it go?
yeah, thank you. Okay, so there's been questions about HB 107. This is the recycling transparency. We, as your hauler, need to provide information about how much we collect of recycling that goes for recycling. We do not deliver recycling directly to the landfill unless there's been a fire and the recycling is damaged. Then we would take that load right to the landfill. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. But the requirements are that at least twice a year that cities are publishing what is collected in your city. So what we have on our website is a new page that we created, and I have the drop down box so you can see where it's gonna be, where it's located now. And where each of the cities will have a link to know, a resident can go on there and look at how much we collect for each city. We also have a vision to put up for each city and have it published at least twice a year. That's what the mandate is. That's what we're gonna help you to make happen. And then it's also, you have to publish it in a newsletter. So we send information to your PIO here at Pontwood Heights of our services, and we will report the tonnages that's required that twice a year. If that makes sense. Any questions on that? We want to help you stay in compliance, and we want to be in compliance. And next up is what we talked about, and that is the hazards of waste and recycling collection. This is a recycling truckload, and as you can see, there was quite a bit of recycling on this load and on the truck. And I spoke to the driver, and I'm very thankful that he was not hurt. This is the second fire that we've had in a side load truck this year. They're common, but they seem to be a little more often this year, so that's concerning. So we're pushing out the education. What the culprit was in January and what the culprit was here is a battery. This was back from a battery from a scooter. The driver said he heard it hit, and almost immediately he could smell smoke. So he did exactly what he's trained to do, found a park to pull into, dumped the load in a parking lot, calling the fire station and the supervisors along the way. And the fire station got their UFA to put it out quickly, which we're very thankful. But you can see the majority of that is damaged, so it would go unfortunately to the landfill, and we can't recover that.
So you said you're communicating that, or you have a process to communicate that. Can the city help with our communication channels? Because I think that is absolutely something we'd love to get out to our residents.
Thank you.
I think we put stuff in the newsletter before.
Yeah.
What's allowed
And we just did it again with this situation. So we did it in February with the fire that took place, and we did it here again.
Maybe we could hit our social media. Some people.
And it
follow
might
social
be
media more
worth,
than
instead of having a
newsletter.
laundry list, sometimes people get lost in that. If something specific caused a fire, something that literally just says, do not put battery, like that specific.
Yeah, I agree.
And we're rotating it anyway. You might as well hit the hot button issue and even show this picture of what happens when you do it.
But as important is where, if you can't put it in a bin,
Yeah.
where can you take it? And right now I have 2 printers that need to be recycled. I've got to take them all the way to 2600 South and 2300 West or something. So the fact that we don't have
The default,
places to bring these
Yeah.
things is a problem.
the prescription drop-offs are a little better than they used to be, but yeah, sadly,
Batteries are pretty simple. Wherever you buy the new one, you actually get money to take back the old one. They'll actually give you money back
A cell phone
that.
battery? Or a
for what? Well, any type of a car or scooter, motorcycle battery, they will.
But Pam, when in doubt, the landfill, which is way out west, is kind of your standard.
Yes.
They have different lanes for every possible thing that you can think of. That's probably the best place to go. It's super far.
I
It
would say
is,
this is
but-
not, I don't think that it really incentivizes people to do the right thing because of the huge inconvenience of going out to the solid waste facility.
No, you're right. You're right.
So maybe we can do better than just advertising it to say, don't put it in there, that you have to know where to put it.
Well, and two, of course, we just hosted the Charm event, that was, sponsored by the Utah Recycling Alliance. And they focus on the hard to recycle things such as far as I can remember, batteries and printers and they had several vendors there. And, I know Robbie Overson, who was instrumental in, helping to bring this first charm event to Cottonwood Heights, is interested in making it a semi-annual event, in which case some people have the space to hold on to something until they can, load a number of things in their car and come to a semi-annual event here at the city hall. So perhaps this could be a discussion and collaboration between staff and the rec board and the Utah Recycling Alliance to come up with something that would help our residents to have a place they could, if you could leave it in your garage for 2 or 3 months. Our charm events are every spring and fall.
And I'll tell you, Pam, how long have you worked there?
It's July of 2007.
So she's been there a while, but I'll tell you. These meetings that we have, people are throwing out ideas constantly and they're trying to think outside of the box, and she's very, very receptive to these things. I mean, we'll have these discussions of, and I've even thought about it, part of it is the money and logistics.
Sure.
That's the hang up on these things, but I've thought, could you do a day where up here at City Hall, people can bring a lot of these items that are the difficult items to get rid of? But again, it's the staffing and the logistics.
Well,
which
I don't know
tough.
that did anybody else make it to the event on June 8th? I don't recall seeing any staff or anybody at this table. But I will say that there was a number of vendors, so it was very well organized. As cars came into the parking lot, they were greeted. So they had people kind of like an In-N-Out burger, you pull up and they walk up and say, what are you here for? And then the person says, well, I have a car battery, a scooter battery, and, these five. And they say, okay, well, as you advance, pull your car over here, please don't leave it idling. And they point out which vendors, of which there was maybe 8. Some are there because they make money from collecting these things, and others had other reasons. But I guess the point is, I think the time has come, especially with the emergence of so many batteries, lithium and otherwise, and the danger, that, we can coalesce around something that should be viable for many people, whether you have a large garage or not, to hang on to a few of these things. I think people are willing to do that for a few months.
Yeah.
Do
But they're
we
not
have,
willing to.
Charm scheduled to come in to give us a report on how they think it went? Have they asked for that?
We haven't scheduled anything on that. Their communication, they reached capacity as far as the weight load. So it was a successful event based on that.
Yeah, I think.
And they were weighing so many of the things, so it was very measured, right?
Yeah, they're gonna calculate all the data of the different materials they received and then meet with staff. And if the council wants a report on that, I'm sure they'd be happy.
Yeah, as soon as that's ready, then maybe we have a discussion and decide if we how often we want to do it.
Sure.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, as residents, we can deliver, HHW, household hazardous waste, to either of the landfills for free of charge. For you as a city to host an event, then if you have Safe Harbors, say, come, and they're ones that will handle that waste, it will cost money, of course. With Charm, I'm not sure if it was a volunteer basis and the people that handled that were free.
Well, Charm is only the name of the event.
Point
The
is-
organization is the Utah Recycling
Yeah,
Alliance.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha,
Point is this is something we could do if we wanted to.
absolutely.
In partnership with them.
Yeah, so these are items that we don't want in the garbage can, and especially not in the recycling can. And if you click on any of those, Paula, hopefully we're gonna be working today, it will give you a list of where you can take these items. And yeah, the landfills are not convenient. I know that I've gone around my neighborhood and say, hey, I'm going and taking TVs, whatever you have. Cause like I said, I'm a nerd. And we'll load up the truck and haul it out there, and it's nice because it is free.
So Pam, did I understand you saying, so you'll do basically what Charm did, come and having a host something here where people can bring these items? Is that what I heard?
Well, we can't handle it, but we could have Safe Harbors come, but the city would need to sponsor that cost.
Okay.
What I say when I go around to pick it up, that's through my neighborhood.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a nerd, so. Yeah, do you live next to me? I'm sorry, you need to move. So anyway, that's, I just wanted Paula to pull that up so you can see what's on our website. You can click any of those and we'll give you a list. So I'm not sure if you can go back, I apologize. That is a link on this report and then also, on the newsletters that we send out.
I just
With-
Googled it and I'm glad to see it. I mean, Salt Lake County, slco.org comes up first and then you're next, or hazardous waste Salt Lake City. So, just try to be the consumer, like, if I were a consumer, what would I do? I just Google it.
Yeah,
So you do come up.
and it will
Good.
direct you probably to that web page, because we don't actually collect it ourselves, because we're not allowed by the health department. All right, so, oh, I'm in control now. Here we go. So, other information and updates, so we have our, waste and recycling workers, National Waste and Recyclers, work week this week. Something that you could do nice is just to wave at your garbage and recycling and green waste driver or scrap driver and just say thank you, a small thank you from anybody. Putting out a drink on the top of your can that's, you know, Gatorade or water, is also very appreciated, especially in the hot months.
It'll get hot if you leave it out there.
Yeah,
Is that the event you're doing on Thursday?
Yeah.
Thursday morning?
yes.
Okay.
So we're hosting an event to, and what we call, and started this way back when the Garbage Person Day first came out. So we have a Garbage Person Day celebration and it'll be on the 20th at our 604 West, 6960 South, the north parking lot. We'll have a food truck there. And that's to celebrate all of our employees. We've invited board members to come. Please feel free to stop by if you can. It's a 7 a.m. I understand if you can't make it, but definitely give them a shout out. And then on July 3rd is the International Plastic Bag Free Day. So I just wanted to make sure that we got the word out for that. It was in the newsletter to make sure we got it, information out about that. So some stores are even offering discounts on other perks if you bring your own bag. You'd have to look up each store to know exactly. I do want to point out that we have an app on our website. You can download it on your app's phone, the app on your phone, or you can go to our website and click the QR code. But it is the Recycle Right tool. There's a search tool in our app that you can hit it and type in anything, tinfoil, and it'll tell you where to put it, garbage and cardboard recycling, obviously. Those are the obvious ones, but that's just a tool that we want to provide for residents. There's no questions on that. I'll keep rolling. So right now, that's the information I have in my report, but I do have some initial stats for scrap, the container program, because I know that's the popular and what's going on with it. So we started in May 31st, as you know. There are 3 zones that we service. There's 16 delivery days total. We just started zone 3. Zone 1 had 6 days that a resident could go online and choose from when they set up a reservation. Zone 2 and 3 have 5 days that they can choose from. One of the things I pointed out to our board and want to say is that before, when we had it in the street, it was 1 day, take it or leave it. Now a resident can go on there and choose. I do realize that the reservations book up really fast. I do understand that. Right now, we're delivering in Cottonwood Heights about an average of 61 containers a day. We estimate a total of 990 this year. Last year, we delivered just over 1,000. Sione does a great job of overbooking per se, because we get cancellations. The good news is if we actually hit where we overbooked, that we pull full-time staff if we have to, but luckily we've only had to pull 1 so far. And that's because we've ratcheted down the total amount that we do. And it really does help our crews. We're only able to recruit 7 part-time drivers this year and have to pull from the full-time staff, when right now we're 6 full-time staff driver vacancies.
So when I first got put on the board, I chatted with Pam. I said, listen, in Salt Lake where I grew up, we put everything on the curb. I miss the days in Cottonwood Heights when, you know, they would even just put one in your little cul-de-sac, and then you didn't have to reserve anything. You could just count on it. And I really pushed and said, I really want to get back to a solution like that instead of having to get on at midnight. Now, to give her a lot of credit, I respect how difficult of a job she has. And I didn't realize that they would hire part-time staff. It's not like you have a part-time employee that is an annual employee, they're just part-time. They would literally hire them just for a month, 2 months, or whatever that season would be, to be able to do this giant rotation where they were constantly moving these things around. And just her explaining how difficult it is to go out in the workforce, A, to even hire anyone, but also hire them to do trash. And even then, to even further, to say, hey, I need someone who can just work in this random window and doesn't have anything else going on. And some of these people, to my understanding, needed to have certain licensure for
Commercial, CDL.
a CDL.
CDL.
So you need so you take all of those factors and you can now see how difficult that can be. Now, I said, I respect that, but I'm hoping
Yeah.
that we can try, and the entire board is pretty open of looking at these ideas and seeing what can be feasible. And just like the discussions that we have here as a council, it's, okay, these are some things we want to attack, but we're not gonna be able to do it this year. Let's do status quo and let's keep working towards to figure out if we can get there. And that's the same thing that's happening there, because I think most residents would like some form of what used to happen,
Yeah.
which was pretty convenient. So, but anyway.
Now, I have a question on that. When the bins were on the streets, this is a safety question. There were people that would drive around and hop in and hop out. I imagine that those incidents caused a big concern for chief, for police, and for fire departments, because there's some things in there that can actually really harm folks. But I watched them driving around, pulling stuff out of the bin.
Well, they would not only pull stuff out, but you'd see people drive around looking for those bins, and they would unload, and you would get contractors and other types that don't want to drive out or don't want to pay for the load, and they would just go unload everything into these. So there were other problems as well, which shows just how difficult it is to solve.
They're called scavengers, and those are called poachers.
Yeah.
We named them.
I remember your explanation, because I did get a lot of feedback about, I didn't get up at midnight, I got on at 8 a.m. and they're gone.
Yeah.
So that can't be fixed?
Alcione.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah, that's why I'm supposed to say that to
No.
my constituents, call Sione.
So the reason why they did the reason why they did midnight is the demand is so high that they did not have the technical capability to have that many people come and their site would crash. So they did it at midnight. Now, that's also like, you feel like you're waiting to buy the new iPhone. You're sitting up at midnight trying to, but no, it's just to reserve a trash bin. But that's the reason why. But yeah, the sad thing is you get in the morning and they're already gone. And we talked about doing this as well. The board has also talked about, okay, if you got one this year, because the demand is so massive, are you now unable to get one next year? So the people who didn't have a chance to get one can now get one. Now, I think that does add some equity in there, but there's also problems with that as well. I don't know if I told you this, Pam, but someone on the Cottonwood Facebook page, the community page, they were bartering for the bin, saying, we need this more than you, like, what are you willing to give it up for? Yeah, it's crazy. So the demand is
So
there.
I happened to be in Alabama, and so I set my alarm for 1 a.m. and I woke up and reserved my bin. So, it wasn't the best thing, but at 1 a.m. my alarm went off, I went on and reserved the bin, and it came in.
And I guess I would ask my colleagues here, if you have other ideas, I'd love to take them as representing the city to try to go see if we can come up with some better approaches.
Well, I understand that we are no longer pursuing the way in which Sandy runs their summer program, where they a couple times, maybe during the summer, whatever your address is, the week that there's gonna be a truck that comes by and takes anything from your curbside and takes it away. And the reason I find that so appealing is if we're really going for the 4 Rs of reduce, reuse, recycle, refuse, then what happens is people in need go by and say, oh, I could use that gently used sofa, and hey, I wonder if that
I
TV
think
works,
Pam's trying to
etc.
prevent that.
And we may giggle about that, but if we are serious about reducing what goes to the landfill, then the dumpster divers that we're making fun of, you know, there is a need for people in less affluent places to go by. And I've been watching, my son has lived in Sandy now for 14 years. And so I watched the phenomena of people going by and taking what they need. But do I understand that that's just too expensive for Cottonwood Heights or for Whitworth to, you know, to pass that along?
It's the
So
employees.
So we do the bins because
and
it's less
safety.
expensive to Whitworth in the city. Is that right?
No, we do the bins because of staffing levels. And we started in 2020. This is our 5th year of running the reservation program. The only reason we had to make a change was because of staffing.
So staffing to go and pick these things up is too great.
The
They can't get the
traditional
people.
program required
Too many CDL
18
drivers.
CDL drivers
Mhm.
and then 10 ground crew to manage the piles.
That were just hired for that part-time
Yes.
window.
So to
Yes.
move all these bins, these 600 bins around is less people?
So, well, what we did with the traditional program was about 120 containers a day, moving through neighborhood by neighborhood. And they go into the driveways because there's no way we would have the staff to clean it up if it was out in the street and it was a target for whoever drove by.
And they get
or-
people like, that would just start putting stuff around the bin.
No, I get it. I'm kind of anti-bin, I guess
Yeah,
is
yeah.
what I'm
No,
trying to get to. So
And she
I'm
knows, I've
I'm
had that
just
same
trying to
conversation.
understand. So this is, and how long do people have the bin in their driveway then for a week or?
No, it's 24 hours.
Only 24
Unless it's on a
hours.
Friday, then they get it for the weekend. And
Okay.
Fridays are the quickest to book up. So I know for me, our neighborhood, we try to share and we take turns with sharing the driveways. So it was our turn this year. Woke up at 3 a.m., totally forgot that I didn't get online. Friday was gone, of course, but I had 3 other days to choose from. Again, that wasn't the case it was in the past. There's not, every resident is gonna wanna share their bin. That's why the thought is, you know, for the board to consider, setting the policy that it's every other year, or you don't get it if you had it the year before. So it is totally based on the CDL driver shortages nationwide in every industry. It's not just us.
UTA and all, yeah, no,
Yeah.
I get it. I get
School
that, yeah.
bus.
Mhm.
I had every member of my circle bring something to the bin.
Yeah.
You know?
We'll continue to dive through and see if something else can be found out,
Yeah.
or figured out.
Yeah, if we could get the drivers, we wouldn't have changed it. I mean, we wouldn't put you through it, we wouldn't put the residents through it, and we sure as heck wouldn't put our staff through it.
Yeah.
Well, Pam, thank you. That's the end, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I have one more question,
Yes.
but, and I know you're only the hauler. You're not the recycler, but do we know the percent of recycled things that are put in the bin that are sent to the landfill versus there's actually being recycled?
Bless you. So the information that you're asking about is a contamination rate or a clean recycling rate. And I did come armed with that today. If memory serves me correctly, for Cottonwood Heights, you have a pretty high clean rate. So your contamination or what's garbage that's in the recycling can, I believe, is less than 20%. At least I'm going by memory, but I can look it up and send that information back to you.
The Southern before was like 63% is good stuff going through, if I remember that number.
It's actually a little higher. It's in the 80 percentile.
Okay.
For Cottonwood Heights, not everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Our
Yeah,
residents do a
unfortunately.
really good job of making sure they put the right stuff in
Yeah.
the right place.
I appreciate that. We want to send the right signals to the consumer.
Absolutely.
And
Pam-
is that measured by that's not measured by Whitworth though, that's measured by where you drop the recycled items to. And who are those entities?
So there's sample sorts, and each of the vendors that we contract with, both Waste Management in Salt Lake City, and then Rocky Mountain Recycling, which is located in South Salt Lake City, do a sample sort, and we are on site for those sample sorts. That's something that we.
How
haven't-
frequent are the sample sorts?
Sorry,
How frequent are the sample sorts?
for Rocky Mount Recycling, they're monthly, and it does move throughout different cities, of course, because we have 12 to 13 that we take to Rocky Mountain. And then we have 1.5 others that we take to Waste Management.
So 12 different cities. So they might do a sample sort on Cotton Heights once a year.
Usually it's a little more often than that, but yeah, it could be.
I knew she had a hard job, and then I found out that they also service Immigration Canyon, these poor people. All right, Mayor, back to you.
Thanks, Pam.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Good note, Dan.
Thanks for being a great partner. So item 4 on our agenda today, we have the Director of Community Engagement, Ally. I don't know how to say your last name, Ally. Ero, okay, from Utah Open Lands here. So they would love to come talk to us about their Transit to Trails expansion program, and we're here to listen. So thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So my name is Ally Ero. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at Utah Open Lands. And I am here today, as you said, to talk about the Transit to Trails program and the potential of expanding it to users on the Wasatch Front. So the Transit to Trails program, for those who aren't familiar, is a free transportation solution for trail users to access 3 popular trailheads within the Bonanza Flat conservation area. And I just wanted to give a little bit of background on this area before we move forward. So next
I gave
slide.
you a little.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. That way you point it to. Is it not working? Yeah, there you go.
Here we go. Okay. So Bonanza Flat is at the top of Guardsman's Pass, and during the summertime, that's accessible via Big Cottonwood Canyon. And it represents over 1,500 acres of, miles of trail, various wildlife habitat, and some stunning alpine lakes. There's a picture of Blood's Lake up there. The award-winning Blood's Lake Trail goes through the Bonanza Flat Conservation Area, as well as other trails. The Girl Scout Camp, which actually is the nation's leading Girl Scout camp that the Girl Scouts go to, is within the Bonanza Flat Conservation Area, which is pretty cool. And all of these different components, in addition, the wildflowers that spring, that bloom every spring, and then the aspen groves that turn, those really vibrant yellows and oranges during the fall, attract visitors, residents and tourists alike every year. And then in 2017, just to provide a little bit of background, Bonanza Flat was threatened by development. It was going to become potentially 120 plus units of housing, an 18-hole golf course, private, and the community would lose this cherished space. So partnering with Park City Municipal Corporation, we really rallied the community to protect this area. Park City residents approved a $25 million open space bond, and then Utah Open Lands spearheaded the fundraising campaign, that remaining $13 million gap needed to forever protect Bonanza Flat. So this area was placed under conservation easement with Utah Open Lands in 2020. And at the same time, if we're thinking back to 2020, we saw the COVID-19 pandemic have some pretty profound impacts on recreation trends across the state. We saw a 300% increase in use of recreational areas. And with that use came, some concerns of overuse. So we launched what we called our Leave It Loved campaign. This is all around this idea of what can we individually do to challenge our inner steward and to really be good stewards of the landscape so that it can be loved for generations to come. So as part of this looking at this overuse component, and then looking at how can we challenge our inner steward and, do what we can to leave this area loved, we launched the Transit to Trails program. So Transit to Trails started in 2021. And it has previously been funded in collaboration with Park City Municipal Corporation, which is the landowner, and then private grant donations that have been made to Utah Open Lands, and then funding as well from the Central Wasatch Commission, through their short-term grants program. So, yes, that is kind of a little bit of background on transit to trails. Here are just some old posters from previous summer and fall. And then recently we had some area usage data collected from the Bonanza Flat Conservation Area. And what we found, so what you're looking at here are the 2022 data and the 2023 data collected for the top 10 visitors of Bonanza Flat. And as you can see, what we found is that a significant amount of the visitors that are coming and recreating at this area are actually coming. I'm so sorry, I'm a little nervous. This is my first time presenting to a Catholic
You're
nurse.
crushing it.
Thank you. Is that a substantial portion of these visitors are coming from areas along the Wasatch Front. So we, put our heads together and we're like, okay, what can we do to expand this program and offer the same, the same opportunity to trail users along the Wasatch Front to sustainably access this area?
How do you track that number? How do you find that number out?
Cell phones. So I'm not quite sure. We contracted with a third-party group that they collect usage data that
McDonald's knows.
essentially just tracks, like, as you're going, the how you've registered your phone and what home address you've used. It collects it from that source.
Smart.
Yes.
I don't like it, but smart.
Yes. A little bit scary. Yes, for sure, a little bit scary. So essentially what we're going and asking for is we're looking to partner with entities along the Wasatch Front. So why we're presenting tonight is to request $10,000 to contribute to the program cost to expand this program to the Wasatch Front. Transportation costs for the program in its entirety, if it were to range from July to October, which is currently, it's kind of hard to think, but once you're up there, it's like there's snow until July pretty much. So July through October is sort of that full range of service. We've only offered transit to trails Thursday through Sunday. And this is again talking about the program coming from the Wasatch back. So currently it just operates from Park City up to those trailheads in Bonanza Flat. So this would be extending it from stops in, Cottonwood Heights and Sandy, going up and, a really beautiful way too. Leaf peeping. There's a lot of congestion at those trailheads. So going up there, yes.
I have never experienced this, so could you help perhaps for all of us?
Yeah.
When you talk about transit to trails,
Mhm.
so there's the high country transit, but I don't think you're talking about that. Are you talking about strictly like a parking area where people who want to get to Bonanza Flats to hike know that they can leave their vehicle at certain locations in Park City and this shuttle will get them up for their hiking experience and back to their car that they have left? Where are they leaving their car? Is it in Park City? Where is?
Yeah. So it's called the Munchkin Lot, but it's down basically right at the bottom of Park City, by Main Street. And so users, exactly kind of as you're suggesting, go on, they sign up for a slot, a time slot going up, they sign up for a time slot coming back. So depending on if they just want to be up there for an hour versus if they want to do a longer loop, a longer hike, and they want to be up there for 3 hours, it's flexible in
And
that
it's
way.
free to the
It's
app
completely
user?
free to the user, correct. And so then they come to the parking lot, they drop their car off, they get on the shuttle. The shuttle so far has been pet friendly and has room for bikes, which is really great. And then it takes you up, it drops you off. There's 3 different locations that it drops off at: Mid-Mountain Trailhead, the Bonanza Flat Trailhead, and then the Bloods Lake Trailhead. And I'm not sure if any of you guys have been up to those trailheads during the summer, but it's really difficult to find a parking spot if you are going after 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. So this is a way that, you can plan ahead and make sure that you're having a stress-free experience. And it's also saving a lot.
What does the fleet look like that you use?
Yeah, so we've partnered with a few different third-party transportation providers. We've partnered with Utah Mountain Shuttle before. And then we recently have switched over to Pro Transportation. And This year, I believe we're going with that, Transportation Pros or Pro Trans, this, yeah, for another year of service.
What kind
but-
of vehicles do they have?
they're they almost look like Sprinter vans, but I believe they're like 15,
15 seat.
yeah,
Yeah,
15 seat vans.
Great.
And they just go kind of on a loop and they drop people off, and then pick them back up and take them
Brilliant,
back down.
that's great, yeah.
Yeah. And then, let's see, a couple more things. Yeah, so if we were to do the entire summer, the transportation costs range from about $60,000 to $75,000. What we're proposing is to have a pilot program of sorts, so only do the last 2 months. The reason why we're focusing on those last 2 months, as I said, is this area is really popular in the fall for leaf peeping. It's actually one of those, you know, on like the list of like top 10 hikes to do in the fall to see leaf colors changing. It's kind of all over the news and everything like that. And it's gorgeous. It's understandable why, but just getting this program up and ready for this fall so that we can take people up there. We've already received a $10,000 grant from the Central Wasatch Commission to kickstart this expansion of the program. And then in addition, we are working with some corporate partners to be able to offset some of that cost. So what we're looking for is $10,000 from the Cottonwood Heights City to be able to put towards the cost of this program. And then, you know, be able to offer this.
So I'm sorry if I missed something, but when you talk about the Wasatch Front, so you're talking about getting people from certain locations here on the Wasatch Front to certain trailheads, not to Bonanza Flats. Do you have a map of that, or can you help
I
us
don't have a
understand?
map, but so it would be going up Big Cottonwood. We're looking at potentially offering a couple additional stops as you're going up, at different trailheads as you're going up Big Cottonwood. But it would be taking them to Bonanza Flat on the other side as you drop down on Guardsman's Pass.
So people would leave their vehicles at places yet to be determined.
Yes.
And then they would be taken, so I could jump out at Butler Fork, or my favorite trailhead in Big Cottonwood Canyon, or go all the way to Bonanza Flat.
Mhm.
But it's not accessing the trailheads along our foothills or Little Cottonwood or Mill Creek.
It would just be going up
Strictly
Big
Big
Cottonwood,
Cottonwood.
at least for right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how far into the Central Valley can people leave their car? Or have you started to think about that at all, where they would leave their vehicles?
It kind of depends. So it depends on the financial partners and where we can get our funding from. So if we can get, you know, Sandy on board and Sandy gives us, you know, that $10,000 buy-in, we would be able to, you know, work with them and say, okay, what makes the most sense for your citizens? Where is a convenient location for them to come, a safe location for them to be able to leave their cars at, that we can pick up from. Similar situation here. So, you know, working with you all to determine what parking location works best and makes the most sense for your residents. And then, you know, working with Salt Lake City in the same manner.
And why not approach Salt Lake County, since I saw so many different cities on your report for the funding?
Yeah, that's a great question.
My
These are
guess
just
is
the
you're
ones that we're
approaching all of
currently.
them.
I would also guess that. I can check in with our executive director on that, but I know that for sure we're in contact with Salt Lake City, Sandy, and Cottonwood Heights, but we can certainly reach out to Salt Lake County as well. Any other questions?
I think
So, and then you're trying to get this up and running, did you say for the fall of this year?
Yes, that's our hope.
Well, Ali, we will take this under consideration. Did you have more with your presentation? Has that?
Is this your first time presenting to the city
Yeah,
council?
you did
This
great.
is.
Good job.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Absolutely, you did great, and we will take this under consideration for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We will move on to our first staff report. So the agenda item is 5A. And it's in reference to the short-term rental fine and follow-up discussion that we've had previously. So I'm gonna have our city manager, Tim Ting, start us off with this.
Yeah, this is an item that you'd asked to discuss more fully. It was something we talked briefly in the before and also in the retreat. And so I'm gonna have Mike kind of present some ideas and Chief Russo about some concepts that we want your input on related to a direction on this.
Okay, well, thank you. So we're just kind of picking up where we left off a couple work sessions ago. We kind of approached the idea of some different options to look at short-term rentals in the city from a policy standpoint. Understanding that staff's, we've tried to just gather a lot of input and research and, understanding what the common issues are, the common concerns we get, and the kind of the limitations of enforcement by the state code. We've come up with some ideas that if the council were to consider broadening the policy or changing the policy as it exists today, that would include some of the things that we would recommend including in that. And then at the end of this, some feedback on next steps would be helpful for us. So I do want to go over two existing ordinances first, because what we would recommend if you're willing to entertain a change to our current ordinances would be a combination of some of the standards in our current short-term rental ordinance and our current accessory dwelling unit ordinance. So this is just an overview of what's basically in the city code today. Short-term rentals are anything rented for fewer than 30 consecutive days. They are allowed in very limited areas. They require a business license and a conditional use permit. And then they have to be located in areas zoned multifamily, containing at least 8 units in their multifamily project, and all part of a private street system. Functionally, what that means is 90 of the 100 or so licenses that we issue every year are in 3 developments: the Canyon Racket Club condominiums, the Oaks at Wasatch condominiums, and then the Canyon Place condominiums. So the vast majority of our licenses are in those 3 areas.
Hey, Mike, quick question for you. Those areas, obviously, they were zoned that way. Was that from inception?
They've
Of the
been
city, or is
zoned-
that, have we added through the years?
No, those have been zoned two-family R28, two-family residential. They're condominium projects. We inherited that zoning when we became a city. The short-term rental ordinance that since I've been here, it's been the same, but prior to me being here, it's changed a few times. We used to have a moratorium or a cap on how many licenses could be issued. That doesn't exist today. Now it's just based on, are you in one of these qualifying areas or not?
Zone, of course,
Yeah, and then on top of that, there are some areas in the city that meet these standards that have HOAs or regulations, private regulations that would not allow them. We don't enforce those, but they can be enforced privately.
But an HOA could not allow a STR if it wasn't zoned for it.
Correct. It has to meet city zoning, and CCNRs or an HOA could further restrict.
There was a bill this last session that was going to allow HOAs to add STRs wherever they wanted, regardless of zoning. But when I asked the sponsor, do you know that that's happening? They said, it's the first I've heard of that. So anyway, that almost happened. It was crazy.
Interesting.
We went through the short-term rental wars, I call them. I would say probably 2008 or so. It was probably a 6-month process with multiple public meetings and lots and lots of input from the industry as well as residents. And what we have now is what we came up with as a way to open the door a bit, but not allow them to invade most traditional neighborhoods.
So the ordinance right now does not have an owner occupancy requirement. A lot of them are not owner occupied. They're just, investment properties. They don't allow parking on public rights of way. And I think that's what that private roadway standard gets at, is any parking or traffic enforcement can be handled privately that way. They are required, this is pretty standard, to post their license information and contact info on these licensed units. And then operation of an unlicensed short-term rental. This was added to the ordinance a year or 2 ago. If you're operating a short-term rental illegally in the city, by our ordinance, that's punishable as a Class C misdemeanor upon conviction. I think the chief has talked in the past that conviction is difficult to reach, and it's not always the punishment that's handed down. And then again, we stated this last time, a vast majority of the units that we're aware of in the city or that we have issues with are not this. They're the illegal ones that are operating, and
There we go.
you know, the rise in VRBO and Airbnb, you know, these things are just out there happening and they're not
That's a good question.
being regulated.
Is someone allowed to rent out a single room as a short-term rental if they also live there? It's owner occupied. They can't do a skier comes into town, regardless of the platform, skier comes into town, wants to rent a room for 2 days. That's not. that's
Per
not
ordinance,
allowed.
no, that's prohibited.
Okay,
Yep.
just checking.
Is that available for long term?
Yes.
Over 30 days,
So
right?
so that would be the ADU standard, which is here.
Yeah.
And that's anything more than 30 days. The state law on this changed a couple years ago, mandated that cities allow these in their residential areas as permitted uses, so they are allowed.
But even the
Single-family
ADU,
zones.
that's still owner.
Owner occupied, yeah. So our ordinance states the owner occupancy is required. And procedurally, the way we try to verify that is they have to provide proof of primary occupancy. There's a number of different ways that we accept that. And then they sign an affidavit that gets recorded that further acknowledges that they understand the rules and the regulations. And then those licenses don't transfer to new owners. The new owner would have to come in and re-sign a new affidavit with that new ownership information, re-license it. We also require a business license and then a building permit walkthrough inspection to make sure the habitable conditions meet minimum building code standards. Egress windows are a big one. We don't want to see, you know, converting a basement closet into an ADU. It's got to have egress windows, you know, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide, you know, those basic life safety things that you want in a habitable space.
Chief, did you have something?
No.
Okay.
And then we require this is the max we could require by that state code amendment, one additional parking stall that is what we call non-tandem. So it can't be behind. If you have a 2-car garage, you can't count the space right behind the second car in the driveway as one of the stalls, because then you have to jockey cars to get in and out. And that's allowed right now. And so anything over 30 days, you can rent to a second family following these standards. I think there was some concern early on that when we adopted this ordinance, there'd be a rush on these and it would overwhelm the city. It hasn't played out that way. The uptake in terms of the licensing process has been pretty slow. It's pretty steady now, but it was very slow originally when this was adopted.
Remind me, I think there is a rule that only so many people in a home can, what is it? Can't be
Unrelated.
related. Explain that.
Fashion singles.
Yeah, you can't have that in yours, it's no more than 4.
Yeah, so that's the definition of a family, a single family. And that's a group of people that are all related to each other in some way, or up to 4 people that are not all related. Either one of those qualifies as a single family.
Outside of the owner,
That can
4.
include the owner.
so
4 total.
4 total.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're not all related. If you're all related, you have a family of 20 in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
same house, and it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
okay.
So yeah, if it's right now, if you have say a couple upstairs and a couple downstairs, it's just 4 people, they're not all related. That's one single family. They don't technically have to go through this process. But if you add, you know, if you have a family of 4 upstairs and a couple downstairs, then that's a second family. You have to get an ADU license.
Problem is proving that.
Yeah,
They're always my cousin Vinny.
sure.
We kind of assume that very few people that are in the ADU standard are actually getting a license, right?
Yes, we know they're out there. The ADUs typically don't generate, I don't think, the amount of enforcement calls as some of the problematic short-term rentals do.
That's right.
This, however, does, you know, when we do discover them, this gives them a pathway to compliance. Where before it was, hey, you don't have a license, they're not allowed here, and we're getting into eviction and you gotta
Sure.
kick people out.
License fee.
This, yeah, it's a home business license, like $100 or $150
Is
a
that
year.
annual?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, here,
Mhm.
sorry.
And then the walkthrough inspection, sometimes they have to do full, you know, remodels of their spaces, so they get permits for that. At a minimum, they do like a $50 walkthrough inspection with the building department to make sure it meets code. So given the direction previously to explore some options if the council were to consider, kind of changing the short-term rental ordinance to acknowledge the fact that these exist all over the place, and understanding the difficulties still with enforcement of those units. That we can't use website listings alone. We have to go build evidence, present it to a court. If a direction were taken, we would recommend that it include, provisions similar to what you see here. What we would, if there's a desire to make a change, we would say, hey, a lot of the illegal short-term rentals right now are not owner occupied, they're the absentee owners. That's a problem. That takes away from the housing stock, that takes away from your neighborhood character, your pride of ownership. That would be something we'd want to regulate. Consider expanding the allowance of short-term rentals into single-family areas, but require a lot of the things that the ADU ordinance does today. Annual licensing, regular inspections, potentially a conditional use permit. Certainly, at a minimum, recommend that owner occupancy requirement, because that does help address a lot of the concerns. And Chief, maybe you can talk to, I don't know that a lot of the ones we get called on are owner occupied. Yeah, I know we have a lot of issues with ones that aren't, they're just absentee owners.
Oh, that's correct, because they don't have any skin in the game, so, and it's not their own property, so they don't care. But if they went over there, it would be a different story.
Yeah. We have that established process for verifying that. We're trying our best to verify that. We would also recommend requiring not just one extra parking stall, but probably 2 extra parking stalls, non-tandem stalls. So, sometimes that would require, that might preclude some areas of the city from being able to make that happen.
Okay, so no, there's a home buying, need. They've got tons of people who live in there. Sure, it's a park, it's a great time, I'm sure. But they've got a 2-car garage and then it's just the driveway behind, so that wouldn't count as additional.
Not unless the
Right.
driveway is wide enough that.
No, so it's just straight back.
Nope.
Then they just
Yeah.
use, like, there's 4 or 5 on the street, they're just
Yeah.
straight street parking, which of course that doesn't count.
That's a common concern is parking on the street, especially in the wintertime when these are most pervasive and we're trying to remove snow. So we would recommend 2 off-street parking stalls that are not tandem.
Wasn't one of the things that we talked about, that the homeowners that would most want to do something like this are living in, let's say, modest homes? So about the only way that if we think about an average house,
Mhm.
the driveway is the width of the 2 cars, if they have a 2-car garage, to get up into the garage. So to say that the driveway cannot be used or counted for parking stalls, I think would extinguish the ability of any of the homes that come to my mind. Now, there are more affluent homes that have all the wide extra things. But shouldn't we get back to the core of why we're possibly allowing for additional licenses for short-term rentals, and that's to accommodate the people on tighter incomes?
Yeah, that's absolutely a
So I just
conversation
would like
point
to
that'd be
hear
on the
from
table.
council colleagues on your thoughts of,
The
would
part-
something like that?
The
be
parking
too
is
restrictive?
because, the problem with parking on the street in the winter. So if you allow that, then you're going to get, the problem with
No,
tandem
I'm not,
parking.
just to clarify, I'm not advocating for parking spaces on the road. I'm advocating to allow for the driveway to be considered parking spaces.
I think to Mike's point, though, the reason why they're not counting the tandem spot is just because logistically, you're not actually going to use that as a spot.
You're gonna
So
park on
then
the road.
you just park on the road.
Well, let me just give
Does
you
that
an
make-
example. Well,
Yeah,
I'll give you an example. My house, I have a driveway that we could, if we wanted to, I could put at least 4 cars in my driveway. So back at the 2002 Olympics, we did do some rentals. I think they were for the whole period of the Olympics. But the point is that is where our renters parked, was in our driveway. So the owner, so we used 1/2 of the driveway and we would manipulate our cars, of which we have 2. And the other half of the driveway, if the renters, usually they only had 1 car, but they used the other half of our driveway. So if this rule was in place saying, as I understand what you're describing as a tandem parking spot,
Mhm.
we wouldn't have been allowed to use our driveway. Am I,
You can use it, but not to count towards the additional stalls needed. That's what this is saying.
So-
Currently, the tandem spots for those zones that are zoned for this right now, they do not count. Correct? Is that
Well-
what you said?
Yeah, for short-term rentals right now, it's a little different because it's only in private developments and it just kind of says you have to accommodate cars on your property. You
Okay.
can't park on the public right of way. ADUs say one additional stall, not two, just one, and then it cannot be tandem. So that you could reduce the number of stalls. You could look at allowing tandem stalls to be counted. This
I
is
think as
just,
long as we keep them off the street, I'm not sure why we would want to be so restrictive, as long as the cars aren't parking on the street.
The tandem parking induces people to park on the street because people don't want to go, oh my gosh, move my car off.
But then it's an enforcement. Okay, you parked on the street during
Well,
the
we
snow
can't stop people
period.
from that.
So then that's an enforcement issue that they're then prone to, they're apt to get a ticket for that.
we're not saying this is the right answer, but this follows the kind of
Well,
precedent.
I know, but
set.
you're bringing it in front of the council to deliberate on, right? So I'm
Yeah,
trying,
absolutely.
I'm trying to expand conversation on
That's why we
this.
talked about the other parking situation like in Logan, where you cannot park on the street overnight from November 15th to March 15th without a permit, and they have rules for those permits. I'll just add to your point. My daughter in Murray, her renters, they have this half of the garage and the driveway. And her husband have this half of the garage and the driveway. So it works and it keeps them off the street. I don't know how to administer it, but I
There's
think to your
4
point.
cars in that scenario.
Yes. Yeah, so she has a 2-bedroom basement apartment. And that's what they do. They give the
Yeah,
renter.
they
one
say
half of
your
the
half is
garage
on the right-hand
one half of
side
the
and our
driveway,
half is
then
on the
it's not
left.
a logistics
Then
problem.
you manipulate the cars according to your needs.
Yeah.
My neighbor has an ADU, their renter parks on, they have a little cutout spot. And so it's obviously not an issue for them. The other example by my house, it is 24/7 all year, 365 street parking.
Well, and
We've
this,
got a lot of complaints about from,
the street parking, irrespective of whether it's winter or not, is what triggers the complaints
it does.
to the police.
I will go
Um,
back to say that cars are a proxy for people. The number of cars are the proxy for the number of people. And
Although at the Russo house, we have 4-car parking and 3-car garage and an RV pad on the front. But the Russo daughters always park behind Robbie's cars in the garage, so he has to move. They will not park on there.
Amen.
That's a different city, we can't worry about that.
I mean, it's something to think about. I don't know if it should always be 2. If it's a 1-bedroom ADU or STR, maybe it's only 1. I don't know. It's something to really wrestle with.
Yeah, that's great feedback. So that's something we could calibrate. I think the 2 additional stalls is a single family home requires 2 stalls. If you're having another family rent, 2 is what we proposed in our ADU ordinance before the state came in and set guidelines, and that got trimmed down to 1. So that's kind of the logic for it. We would also recommend, this may be fairly obvious, that properties don't have both an ADU and a short-term rental license active at the same time. You can be approved for both, but only 1 license active at a time, so you're not doubling up. 1 room's an ADU, another room's a short-term rental. Same thing, post contact license info, provide a copy of the city's ordinances and regulations available to renters. I think that came out of the Brighton ordinance that Councilmember Highland provided to us. Restate in the ordinance regulations for noise and quiet hours. That's, one of the other common concerns that we hear is the noise generated from renters. And then, further enhancing the violations, the codified violations, for unlicensed units where there would be a pathway to compliance. The violations ought to be a little steeper if you don't take the time to go through that process. So we're recommending $600 daily. I think the chief has looked at that.
Yes, and we had this discussion before, and we agree with that because the current is not a deterrent at all. I mean, you have people who are making $6+ grand a week and we're gonna fine them $100. Well, I'll do that all day long. That's a great return. So.
Is
Yeah,
Brighton
and-
650? Is it?
They're $650, I think,
Yeah.
right? The other problem, so. The issue of advertising that the state prohibit us from doing. It doesn't prohibit us, we can still use that as a tool. So,
It
If
can't be
you-
the sole source.
correct,
is all.
so if you adopt part of this and they have to be licensed, and then we catch them on Airbnb advertising, then we've got them because they've advertised it, and I just called Mike Johnson, say, are they licensed? No, they are not. Then we can enforce the violations simply based on. It's a great tool.
Some of these things that you put out there, did you snag any of these from other cities? Any best practices that are kind of starting to happen out?
Yes, this is kind of lumping together our ADU regulations that we think work pretty well to address common concerns with reviewing what other cities have done. That's where your conditional use permit gets involved and, you know, some of the parking regulations and things like
Is there
that.
anyone out there in your research that you feel like is doing it pretty well without complete upheaval?
Well, most of the research we've done, ours is really restrictive right now. We're just saying if you're in these limited areas, you can get a license. If you're not, there's no option. So we looked for ordinances that allow them more broadly, that still put some regulation on. A lot of them have these, it's owner occupancy, it's parking, it's kind of the things to
This
see
stuff,
here.
okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question that may come up, and it may come up in the courts as well, going back to the parking in the driveway. If I've got a 2-car garage and I've got 2 kids that are driving, I've got 4 cars in my garage.
Yeah.
In my driveway.
Yep.
It becomes inequitable because just simply because I have an ADU, then now I can't have those cars parked in tandem in my driveway.
Well, so
I just have a different
I'm
opinion.
just talking like.
I don't have an objection to the tandem parking.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm just speaking.
Just
like a
because of
lawyer,
the
so-
example you gave as well.
Mhm.
And- But
So I'm just asking if that was ever brought up when putting the regulations together.
so these are derived from building code parking requirements. A home, a single family home, whether it's one person living in the home or a family of 15, is only required by code to provide 2 stalls. So our logic here is if you put a short-term rental.
2 non-tandem code.
Yes, yeah, 2 non-tandem stalls. So again, regardless of how many people are in that family, it's just 2 stalls. Our logic here is if you add a short-term rental, you're adding potentially another family or family-sized unit. You should provide 2 additional stalls.
In the
It's-
state, you said required in statute an additional,
For ADUs, the
For an
state said
ADU.
you cannot require more than 1 additional stall.
okay.
That's
You don't
why we-
have to,
that's why we
but you
went
can't
with
do-
1.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
And that was a huge point of contention when that ADU ordinance was going through,
Mhm.
was the parking.
So Councilmember Burrell and I attended an AMC meeting, was that what it was? The Association
Yes.
of Municipal Councils, and ran into one of the Brighton city council members. And she provided us with so much feedback about how they really have lassoed in really the non-compliance problems with their ordinance.
And don't they
They
use the
have-
Granicus program?
They
Too.
do, they use the Granicus program to be able to have people report violations. And that's been very successful, but I think the biggest point is they haven't had a legal challenge to their new ordinances since 2020. They gave a grace period for compliance. And then they also have this license revocation process where if you have too many nuisances or violations, you don't get to have a license for a year. So they have enough incentives in place and punishments, consequences, that they seem to have been able to wrangle this in fairly effectively. But I still wrestle with the parking thing because it's such a, like, do we do the parking separate from this? Like Logan City does. Logan City's general guideline, it is not the city's responsibility to provide street parking, period. And that's why they have the ordinances the way they have.
Is that citywide or
It-
is that university adjacency?
I think the winter is citywide. There are other restrictions where you cannot park, of course, in certain zones, even during the day, during certain hours. And you talked to Logan City and they're very effective. Right?
Right.
I remember our conversation.
I mean, I have read in some places where they do advertise that there is a parking spot for you, right? That's part of their, come stay here. You don't have to wake up at 6 when I need to go to work and move your car. I mean, sounds like we can,
Sounds like a
Figure it out,
market thing
yeah.
that we can
Maybe,
figure
yeah.
out. There are cities that just flat out do not allow street parking for STRs. I think a lot, where we've rented along the Oregon coast, for example, you cannot park. And they say in their book, the Airbnb book, you cannot park on the street.
Or your car will go bye-bye.
Yeah.
But I think the general guidelines here are trying to balance the fact that it's really restricted today, and this would be a pretty big shift in that and opening them up a little more while trying to address the most common complaints we get. So next steps, I've just got some, I guess, some pros and cons here, but we've talked through that. I can send this out to you. Next steps, council input and direction, options, obviously, you know, this is not rocket science here. No change. We could just continue on as is. We could look at partial code updates. We could proceed with drafting an ordinance that tries to incorporate some of the changes we just talked about, just for the sake of getting that public input process going and make sure it's communicated well that way, that, hey, this would be, the city's not necessarily determined to adopt something new, but does want to hear from the public on this. You know, you can look at things like, you know, adopting an ordinance on a temporary basis, understanding that if you do that, whatever's approved in that grace period, or that pilot program period, is approved forever. But then that would get you an idea of, is this working? Do we like this? Do we continue it or not?
Other than enforcement, what were the specifics that would change from the current ordinance?
Pretty drastically, because right now they're only allowed in multifamily areas, and this would be opening it up to single family areas with all these requirements layered in on top.
So this could be a shared Airbnb as long as it's owner occupied. You wouldn't have to necessarily be a completely separate ADU.
We envision this as being inside, you know, inside the home, not a detached unit.
I'll just remind the council that based on what Deckard reported to us and what we see in the budget, we're missing at $350,000 a year in transit rental tax because we're not, you know, we don't know where these short-term rentals.
Well, we're missing that because they're not legal in the first place, so they wouldn't comply with the taxes.
Right.
So it really is a question of, do we want to keep it as is, but allow our police department, to be able to do proper enforcement to make sure that people aren't breaking the rules here? Or do we want to make it so that, hey, if you have a house, and yes, it's not going to be completely fair because not everyone may have a house that's conducive to this, but if you have a house where you can sell as a short-term rental, that's not going to be an additional nuisance to neighbors, and that's additional street traffic and other things. You got to remember some streets like Chris Lane, there is no sidewalk, there is no curb. Some of these streets are super old.
Yeah,
And if you have just massive street park, the kids are literally walking in the gutter to go to school. And at that point, where are they even walking? So some areas it matters more than others. But if we're going to make it legal that people can do this, what are the things that we're going to want to put in place to make sure that it is something that's not going to really wreck things for everybody else? And if that is having an extra stall or whatever to make sure you're not on the street, I don't know. We should at least talk about that.
The biggest issue is opening this up to single family areas, and then that's
No,
not
exactly.
for me. You know, long-term rentals, you have people that come in and care. Short-term rentals, you get people that come in that don't. And so in my neighborhood, that's that, you know, it's not what I'm looking for. So.
I've seen the opposite as a landlord. That long-term landlords don't tend to check in as often. Short-term landlords, you have to show that you're keeping up the property, that, you know, you've got to market it. And so there's usually a little bit more attention paid to the property. Now, the nuisances might be a different story, but I find that long-term rental properties.
So are
really
you saying
tend
you
to-
can find somebody doing an STR next door to you?
If it's owner occupied, I'm a little more open to it. I'm not open to just having like the houses in my neighborhood be 100% occupied by a short-term rental.
What if they're like?
Oh, Matt, that was a dig. I'm sorry, council member Holton, that was a dig.
Okay, my 2 cents is if we were to open it to single family neighborhoods, in my mind, I would probably want it to be, if you have a home that does have a place that you can't accommodate in a respectful way, an additional, parking spot, and you're doing it where it's not just out of control. I wouldn't do it where it's like, hey, just jam them in there, park wherever you can. I would not want that. But I definitely think at a minimum, I would love to give the police department and the chief and his team a little more meat on the bone when it comes to enforcement, to make sure that whatever we decide, that they actually can enforce it and there is a penalty that matters.
I think it was, you and I had a discussion early on that you had a lot of empathy for people who really need the extra income to.
Oh,
stay in their
huge.
homes.
Cause I'll tell you, when I was first starting my career, barely starting, I rented out. I had a 2-bedroom apartment, and that other bedroom, I was renting that thing out constantly, and it was the difference of me making it or not. So I do have complete empathy for
I
that.
had many constituents, at least a handful.
So
who said, "We'd
that's
rather do this for
completely
2 months."
different than.
That's an ADU.
Long-term.
That's an ADU. It wasn't long term. It was night by night, but it was still an
It's
ADU.
owner occupied.
It was owner
That's
occupied.
what we're talking about.
It was owner occupied for sure. And to your point, I had to market it and I was cleaning it constantly and,
You have
you
to
know.
show that it's well maintained, and so you actually have an incentive, and then you have a review, like those renters will review you.
It was a short-term rental ADU. That's what it was.
And we have an aging population here in our community as well, where they do need those extra resources. In a lot of cases, they're barely making it.
And you can just do it for the short period of time, so you don't have a long-term renter under you all the time.
So
Making noise, you have it for 2 months.
We've got to move on, but I think it would be worthy of a public comment or hearing period to see what our residents think about this.
Okay.
So I would be in favor of opening it up to see what people think. They want their neighborhoods opened up to
Can I
STRs.
say one last thing? The biggest thing that I've heard from neighbors, specifically with STRs, there are those people that talk about nuisance and late nights, but it's always the top two are the traffic and the street parking is what people are having an issue with. Aside from that, I'm not hearing much else, but the additional constant traffic is a bother.
Would you please send the?
So let's move on to item B in our staff reports, which is I'll turn the time over to Scott to talk about the tentative budget amendment.
This is.
Oh, no, sorry, this is the tentative budget for our fiscal 24-25 year.
Is this identical to the one in our packet? Cause I already have it.
It is.
Okay,
It's,
does anybody want this?
I know some don't. print
Yeah, I
them out.
didn't have a package today, so.
Okay.
Just in case you want to take any notes or anything on it. So let me get this shared. Okay, so the first page is a summary of the items that have changed since our adoption of the tentative budget that happened on May, I believe it was the 7th. Excuse me. And so going down through those items, so in the general fund, we've received our property tax increase and final tax rate. So the increase calculated by the state tax commission is $54,572. So that's $4,000, $4,572 more than we had as our placeholder in there. The final certified tax rate is 0.001357. Currently it's 0.001422, I believe, if I remember that right. And so that's the new information that had not been known prior to this.
Amazing how consistent that is, Scott.
Yeah,
50,000 every year.
it's pretty close to that, yeah. We added in the economic development, we reduced the contribution to the Economic Development Corporation of Utah by 5,000. That has been talked about before. We added in revenue and expense of 72,185 for Salt Lake County Health Department for the Community Health Coalition. We added $10,000 for the annexation study that will be required for the unincorporated area around Creek Road. And we fudged that up a little bit just in case the bid comes in a little bit higher than what we anticipated. And then the stormwater fund, of course, we're anticipating the fee to go from $750 to $820. And that is per ordinance 359 that was adopted in 2021. And that will generate an extra $130,000 that will be utilized for that stormwater needs. And then in our capital projects fund, we have increased the debt proceeds and expenses related to the purchase of vehicles by $7,313. And then also in talking to Zions, we added in $1,500 for the cost of an escrow account. And that's because due to the current delays that we're kind of seeing in our vehicles coming in, Zions doesn't want to manage continual distributions of those funds over time without a fee related to that. So they want to set up an escrow similar to what would be set up on a home mortgage to cover insurance, taxes and other things along those lines. And that's common if we have more than a couple distributions from a bond. So the total of these changes is $76,157 in new revenue and $67,185 in new revenue in the general fund. And then in the stormwater fund, $130,414 in new revenue and expense. And then in the capital projects fund, $8,813 increase in revenue and expense. And then if you're interested, this screenshot comes from the State Tax Commission website, and you really got to zoom in. So I'm going to zoom in on this really quick. You can go in and see the information in here of the real property tax base values. You can see the percent changes, other things along those lines.
This is illegible. I cannot.
He's zooming in
Yeah,
up here.
I'm zooming in
Showing
up here
us
on
on-
your
But I think
PDF that was
Next
sent
time
out.
we could have it so that we can.
Yeah, on your PDF that was sent out, you will be able to zoom in on this and see it and see all the details if you would like. But you can see our old tax rate here was 0.001422. The new certified tax rate is 0.001357. So you can see that. Hold on, I gotta get this to scoot over. You can see the new growth calculation here of $54,572. And then you can kind of look through and see, I've got to go and input and will tonight before I leave the actual tax rate and everything once the budget's adopted, anticipating that it will be this 0.001357. And everything. But if you want a lot of details, you can look through a lot of the details and just kind of see what goes on in the thing. Our 5-year average collection rate is 97.83%. And that's something that goes into how much property tax we're able to budget for each year. That's a factor. So
That's you're saying there's a small percentage that aren't paying.
yes.
That's what you're saying.
And it potentially goes out to a tax sale. That's all handled by Salt Lake County. And everything, if they go beyond a 5-year, you can go up to 5 years and be delinquent and then pay it all off at the end of that 5-year period. So.
Questions or comments from the council? Thank you, Scott.
Yep.
So the last item under staff reports is our cybersecurity presentation. Interesting, Matt and I were talking about this today. So Matt, we're gonna turn, yes, let me have Tim start. Perfect.
Yeah, and. Matt,
Come on up,
come
Matt.
up. So I know that all of you are probably aware with some of the Utah League of Cities and Towns discussion items, as well as other conferences that you may attend. This is a big issue. I've been to a number of city manager meetings, even nationally, and this is a big challenge for cities. We're the low-hanging fruit right now. Matt will explain that. We've taken some big steps because you've important things for us to be as prepared as we can. And Matt has really taken upon himself to implement some very important things. I appreciate his proactive work. We had the state of Utah come in and do an audit on us. We requested them to do that, and we did well. There's always room for improvement because you just never know what is going to happen, but I appreciate the efforts, the funding, and then the efforts of Matt and Alex in putting this together, so I'll turn it to him.
All right, we're gonna skip a couple pieces at the beginning just because I know we're short on time. So you guys all have this emailed. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. This is
Matt,
just-
we're
oh,
okay. We have 20
We're doing
minutes
okay?
scheduled, so I mean, as long as you're not too much longer than that.
I
This
should
is
be
really
shorter than
important for
20.
me to know everything you're gonna talk about.
So the main reason, this introduction kind of talks about the main reason why cities are becoming low hanging fruit primarily falls around small IT staff. Typically, it's less funded for cybersecurity than any other industry. And then, honestly, we have good, robust insurance, and so the propensity to pay is higher. And so if you have a target that's easier to hit and they almost always pay, they're gonna go after you. Banks are great, right? They pay when they get hit in big chunks, but it's much harder to hit them and they're prepared. This we'll talk about, and at the end, we're gonna have kind of that, what's changed, the average number of cyber attacks per week. Banks for the first time fell below cities, with an average of 1,588 for banks and 1,772 for cities. So 2023 was a huge shift. Typically, there's a huge scale of types of attacks. I think most people are familiar, right? Phishing attacks, ransomware, malware, don't click the link in your email. We all know the basics. There is a handful of other things that are becoming more prevalent. The bottom one, external media transfer. There'll be viruses that'll sit on a personal computer. You plug in a USB, you think, oh, it's no big deal. You stick it in your work computer and it'll just use that to propagate. That's becoming a huge one. Or the man in the middle attacks. That's, I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with that. That's a big one that's happening on phones as of 2023. Will be an example of that a little later. Now, when we talk about that lighter funding, this is an area that we've done really well. You guys have funded, we were one of the first cities, I think, maybe one or two others had it before us, for a SIEM and a SOC. So a SIEM is best way to think of it, it's a giant sandbox. We take all of our information, we just dump a ridiculous amount of info and it correlates it, looks for weird changes, looks for anomalies, and then it spits a ton of info out. And again, because we are such a small staff and this is a 24/7 thing, we also have funded a SOC, which is a security operations center that's staffed 24/7. It's manned by people. So if I'm unavailable, I'm sleeping in the middle of the night and we have something happen, they can take immediate action for us and then wake me in the middle of the night, which has happened. This is a good example of kind of what we're feeding in. This is from the month of May. So we had 716 million events dumped into our SIEM. It spit out 71 alerts. 24 of those were something that maybe not too big a deal. They just want to review. We want to make sure we're making some minor changes to prevent something from happening. 20 high alerts, that would be where it's a bigger deal. We may be being proactively attacked or something happening, and we need to take that more immediate action. And those 5 critical, that's where maybe somebody downloaded something or a computer's actively compromised. That system has taken that proactive approach, hit it, and then they've alerted me after, and we just make sure. And the nice piece is that incident declared, that's an indication that if we had an incident or had a critical alert and we didn't catch it in time, we'd have a bigger incident, we'd be cleaning up a much bigger mess. So to date, we've had no incidents. This kind of breaks down what those 71 things were. You can see, I don't know if you can see the mouse cursor. These two go hand in hand. We've had 16% were malware detected and was immediately remediated. So then we're just doing proactive approach of cleanup. The Sophos was our old antivirus. Again, that's a type of malware. You'll have a bad file download that somebody maybe clicked a bad link or an Office 365. So this is just kind of what we see on an average month for what kind of things we're looking for and being hit with. This is our best practices and the parts of the best practices that we as a city actually do really well. So we offer security awareness training for all staff. I encourage all council to take those if you guys would like. It comes out once a month. It's about 5 minutes. They're a micro learning, so it's not too big a deal out of each
Are those
day.
different than the ones that we're currently taking?
No, those are the ones we've been doing that for a
I
while
have
now.
taken every single one.
It's the Ninjo, yeah.
Yeah,
The
they're
Ninjo.
great.
I've learned a
This,
ton from those.
yeah, I have too.
Then I send it out to my family. I mean, not that, but I'm like, you gotta
Click
be
on
aware
this
of.
link.
No.
You'll click right there. Yeah,
Don't
some
be
of them
doing
really
this.
pertain to the city and some are really more on personal life, but I think they're all pretty good, most of them anyway. Another place we're doing well, strong access controls, multi-factor authentication on nearly everything. We've done a lot better in the last couple of years on that. We've done prompt patching software. With Alex's help, we have implemented a lot of automation. So software will automatically patch, so we're not even having to do it. And that's part of how we can keep our staffing smaller and not have to take that hands-on proactive approach. So when you start doing manual installs for everything, you have to manually update everything. And we're trying to get away from that and just maximize what we can do. We do a really good job of our backups. All our critical data is on site and in cloud and secure. And that's an area that we take a heavy focus on. So if we did have an event, we could recover. We restrict administrative privileges and do 100% monitoring. So if Alex or I do anything, everything we do is monitored completely. So if there is an anomaly, we can see that somebody may have compromised our accounts. This is a really nice one. The state actually did, instead of grants where they give us money, they did a process where they paid for a really good program. So we jumped on, I think we were the 6th city to do this, and replaced our endpoint protection. That saved us about $35,000 annually, and it's been a really, really nice product. And then that SOC scene that we talked about for that 24/7 monitoring. Come on, switch screens. Okay, so here's the areas that are good best practices that we might be able to do some improvements. One of our big ones, this is probably the biggest for us, is most of our infrastructure was purchased with the building under bonds. And we're now hitting that 9-year mark. We're starting to see things go just can't be patched, can't be updated. And so we're going to start to see where we have to start running some replacements on some equipment. Most of what you're going to see if we're asking for any money is going to be for things like that. We're going to try and spread it out as much as we can and just minimize those costs. But we are going to start to see that. Encrypting data at rest might be something we'll need to look at. That's more of a, if you get hit, we aren't compromising our constituents' data, so they're getting encrypted data. This one is actually an interesting one. A few weeks ago, there was a call. It's a police requirement that's going to be coming for starting in 2024. But a good option is having a secondary offsite. And this is a good example of West Jordan, one of their hardest impacts of recovery. They had all their data backed up, and because their equipment was compromised, they had nowhere to put it. And so having a secondary site with equipment on hand allows you to actually recover very, very quickly. As we've talked about, phones are probably one of the most heavy used things. So starting to treat phones like computers, that was the big push for some of the cybersecurity conferences this year in every industry. Phones are becoming the active target. And then embracing new technologies. I'm working with Paula and her staff right now. We're looking at AI policies, trying to adopt that newer stuff. How can we use it safely and appropriately rather than not using it? Those are the areas that we're working to improve. This is the one, I believe, Mayor, you and I talked about this a little. These are just some case studies from 2023 that are driving some of the industry change. So on iOS, this does impact some Androids as well, but it's an iOS no-click vulnerability. All it takes is your phone to be out of date and you receive a text. You don't have to open it. You don't have to click on it. You don't have to do anything. And your entire phone is compromised. They can see your passwords. They can see if you have multi-factor, they can intercept that multi-factor, and then they have access to all of your
How far
accounts.
back, how many year-old phones are we talking about?
Brand new.
So the biggest thing that he's gonna talk about is as long as you keep updated, the second updates come out,
Correct.
you're safe.
So the way that works is basically they find a way to make that happen and they start pushing it out in mass. Apple or Android will patch those.
Yeah.
Currently about 25, this is Apple's estimate, about 25% of devices in the US are not patched. So 1 in 4 devices are vulnerable to this. And that's been a big push for why MDMs are so critical, because we can monitor and make sure that those patches are getting pushed. We recently had an NGO training on credential stuffing. This is an interesting one, as attackers would basically buy, say, a hotel chain might have their stuff compromised. And if you use the same or similar login, now they've got it and they'll just start sending it out, trying to log in. They use Zoom because so many corporations are on Zoom. And if a credential worked in Zoom, then they would try it with corporate login as well. So having different credentials
which is a royal pain. I have over 300 credentials, so I totally get it. But using some sort of password manager or something to help make those all different is critically important for all staff. This kind of breaks down that cyber attack by industry where we pulled that data. So you can see education and research. Poor Tim, he's going to a university that gets hit the hardest. Government and military is the #2 spot, and we actually surpassed banking and healthcare. We were in the #5 slot, I believe, as of 2022. We're up to #3. And this kind of details why different agencies are typically hit, but state and local is definitely becoming a huge pinpoint. And this is just some links if anyone wants to really nerd out with me. This is a couple hours of reading. You can go through and see where we pulled most of this data and basically where the trends are heading. 10 minutes, there you go.
So Matt, you are awesome. So when I first came into office, our first conversation, and do you remember that was, so just so you know, somebody that's come from banking who sees cyber attacks, you know, we basically were the guinea pigs, the banking industry was to get attacked. Whatever you need, you tell me, and we're gonna probably get it for you. So Matt has been awesome at, like you said, being out in front. Yeah, we've been in other cities. Since we've been in office, multiple cities in Utah have been attacked and hijacked and paid ransoms. So, you know, in my state of the city, I think I said, what Matt does is as important work as it's done here in these halls, and I believe that. So thank you for everything you're doing to keep us safe and for the emphasis for us to be consistently aware of everything. So, and if you're asking for something, there's a reason for it.
Thank you.
So,
does anyone have any questions? I love no questions.
So Matt and I talked a little bit about what our insurer requires of us. So can you maybe go in real quickly what the Utah Government Trust requires of us?
Yeah, so they don't provide, I mean, they provide the insurance, but they contract through a company called Beasley. And so I typically, every 6 to 12 months, we'll have a conversation with that company just to make sure where the trend's going. Some of their things are required in order to get the best pricing. They'll do an audit that Paul helps fill out every year, and then they'll review it. What they want to see is that continuous patching. They want to see that we are securing all devices. They do have a push for the mobile device management, those kinds of things. We're securing our website. They actually now offer us free vulnerability scanning on the outside to try and get in, and then send me a report monthly on that and ask us to patch those pieces. I think that covers a good chunk of the main stuff. And then the monitoring of the administrative rights. So if anyone has those, what are they doing, and having full monitoring and reporting on that so that we can pull that back and see what happened and when it happened for, I believe, a full year. Is another one of those things that saves us money by doing it. And
Matt, did that answer most of your questions?
Yeah, we had a great conversation.
Oh, you already did.
beforehand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Like anything, we're happy to do whatever. We just want to make sure you guys are educated, and if you guys want to make a change, we can look at whatever.
So I have Napster on my city phone. Is that?
Yes.
So I can.
That one was pre-approved as long as you
Okay.
share the downloads.
Those Ed Sheeran songs I'm not getting rid of.
Okay, that's fair.
It's
Napster.
my.
Wow, haven't used that in a while.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay,
Appreciate it. Welcome, Chico. So quickly, we're just gonna do a review of calendars and upcoming events. The art exhibit at City Hall from Miguel Alejandro Pavon, ongoing from June 3rd through the 30th. The Cottonwood Heights Arts Council play, Beauty and the Beast, July 12th and 13th, 15th, and then 18th through 20th. Performances at 2 and 7 at Butler Middle School. Hopefully we'll all participate and get to see that great play. And then the great people that know how to act in our city. Butlerville Days, July 25th to 27th. And the Bark in the Park in the fall from August 24th from 9:30 to 11:30 at Mountain View Park. So we do have an item to discuss. in a closed meeting concerning the, character and professional competence. An individual, if I could get a motion to leave our work session and enter into a closed session, that would be great.
I'll make the motion to leave our work session. To close our work session or
No,
leave,
just leave.
just leave our work session and enter into a closed meeting. To discuss the litigation, property acquisition and or character and professional competence. Or physical or mental health of an individual.
Are we discussing both?
Not the,
Just the,
Or just a.
character and
Character,
professional
yeah.
competence of the.
Second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
I got-
Let's convene maybe at 6:05.